They carried me to the forest as if I were already dead. The men were my kin, or so they had called themselves, until the night the omen bled across the sky. The blood moon rose like a cauterized wound over Hallowmere, and the villagers decided a girl with a face too pale and a birthmark shaped like a crescent on her shoulder could be reason enough for drought, fever, and stillborn lambs. They tied my wrists with bridal ribbon mockery and pushed me into the thornbrake at the forest's edge, the place where the abbey ruins sank into the earth like old teeth. Left, my uncle said, so night may take what it wants and leave the rest of us be. He tossed my engagement ring after me. It struck stone with the smallest, cruelest sound. I crawled toward the ruined abbey, its arches ripped wide to the sky, a ribcage for the moon. The wind smelled of iron and wet leaves. Bats swung like pendulums beneath the clerestory. When I pressed my ear to the cracked altar, I heard a thin music in the stone, something plucked on strings no human hand could tune. Night gathered. The prayer of the forest began. A fox's cry, an owl's question, branches whispering old names. Then, as though a great bell had been struck beneath the roots, every sound collapsed. The silence was so complete. My breath seemed impertinent. A second sound took its place. Slow, deliberate footfalls. Not on leaves. On stone. "Child," said a voice from the nave. "Why have they dressed you like a bride and thrown you here like meat?" I could not see him at first. The shadows in that place were not absences but inhabitants. I answered through grit. Because I was rejected. Because I was ill-omened. Because fear is heavier than love. He stepped into a seam of red moonlight. He was tall in that way. Portraits are tall spine, like a lance, shoulders that remembered armor. His hair was black with a drowned sheen. His eyes were a red so dark they seemed to be remembering their own fire. His mouth was beautiful, the way a sharpened thing can be beautiful. He wore a traveling cloak, the color of crushed velvet, and an old ring whose metal refused to reflect the moon. "Who are you?" I asked. "Something the abbey failed to bury," he said. "And you?" "Alice of Hallowmere, once promised, now unwanted." He lifted the ribbon at my wrist and frowned at its bridal bow. Cruelty, love's ceremony. With one touch the ribbon loosened. It did not fall, it flinched. "Go back," I whispered. "Men with torches will come to see if I died properly. If they find you, they do not find me," he said. "I find them." The moonlight shifted, and I saw what had not wanted to be seen. The canine length to his teeth. The way the air cooled around him as if night considered him its hearth. The soft, inhuman correction in his pupils. When they narrowed upon my pulse, I should have screamed. Instead, I told him the truth. "I am afraid." "Good," he said softly. "Fear keeps you from making promises to the dark you cannot honor." He turned his face upward to the red moon, as if remembering a vow older than language. When he looked back, a strange gentleness had entered him, as a winter room admits the first coal. "Tonight," he said, "the blood moon names what is forsaken. It is our law to gather such names." "Our?" I echoed. "My court," he said. "My kind." He did not say the word. He did not need to. The thornbrake cracked behind us. Lanterns swayed. Voices approached, full of drink and duty. The stranger took a step closer, and the old ring on his hand warmed with a color I would later learn was hunger. "Alice of Hallowmere," he said, voice very low. "Do you choose to die among men who rejoice in it, or be claimed by the law of the night?" "Claimed," I whispered before courage failed and the lanterns arrived. His mouth curved, not a smile, but a seal upon a pact. He drew me against his cloak. The fabric smelled of stormwater and iron. At his throat, a medallion lay, engraved with an ancient crown. "Name me," he said. "What should I call you?" He bent, and the moon glazed his teeth like lacquer. "The title you will earn by fear tonight, Vampire King." The men burst into the nave, torches shouldering the dark. I saw my uncle's face stretched and eager. I also saw nothing else because the king moved. The torches died not by wind but by obedience. The men's voices telescoped into chokes. The king did not roar or snarl. He stepped through them as a precise blade steps through silk. When it ended, the forest remembered how to breathe again, and the abbey stones stopped singing. He did not look at the bodies. He looked at me, and in that gaze there was neither apology nor pride, only recognition. "You are claimed," he said, "but not consumed. Walk." I walked. Behind us, the blood moon poured itself through the ribcage of the abbey, and I, who had been left to die alone, entered the forest on the arm of Night Sovereign. We traveled by paths that did not exist until we stepped on them. The king's stride was soundless. Mine was not. He matched me anyway, as if time were a cloak he could fold. We came to a gorge where the mountain opened its mouth. The air descended like cold water. Inside, a light burned the color of wine seen through onyx, carved in the rock above the threshold. A crown of thorns that was also, if one looked too long, a nest of serpents. "This is my hall," he said, "and briefly yours." We entered a cavern the size of a cathedral, full of balconies cut from hematite, ropes of roots, and lamps that never smoked. Figures watched from railings, men and women in old fashions, their skin too perfect, their eyes glass-blown red from within. There was a dignity here not born of kindness. They were beautiful the way deserts are beautiful. A woman descended marble steps without touching them. Her hair was white as salt. Her eyes were lit coals. "You went to the abbey yourself?" she said to the king. Displeasure braided into admiration. "This is not efficient." She was thrown where vows were once kept. The king said, "That qualifies her for kindness." "Kindness?" the woman repeated, as if tasting a foreign word. She turned her ember gaze upon me. "Do you know what we are?" "Vampires," I said, careful. "Crude syllables," she murmured, "but usable. I am Sarah, Seneschal of the Red Hall. He is what he is." "What he is?" I asked. "Has he no name?" Sarah's smile showed little teeth. "He has had many. He wears only one on nights like this." The king ignored us both and raised his hand. From the far galleries came a sound like frost cracking. 100 kneels bending at once. "Court," he said. "This mortal was cast to die by those sworn to keep her. On the blood moon, such rejections belong to me." A murmur, like silk sliding down a wall. Sarah's gaze did not soften. "And what will you do with what is yours?" The king turned to me. "What shall I do with you, Alice?" "Let me live," I said. "Let me live in a world where promises are not pulverized the moment they discomfort the strong." His expression altered something like weariness, moving under statuary. "Very well. You will live. But life here has its prices." Sarah's voice was suddenly all hospitality. "Begin with simple ones. Food, fire, a bed. Afterward, the questions." They gave me a chamber in the mountain with a bed sewn of moth, dark velvet. On a table stood a cup of something, not wine, steaming as if it had a pulse. I did not touch it. I slept the way the drowned sleep, without dreaming, because the dreams have already happened. When I woke, Sarah was sitting in a chair that looked like a slice of night. "The king," she said, "has not chosen a consort in an age. He chooses other things, wars, decrees, silences. Tonight he chose you." "I did not ask," I began. "Of course you did," she said. "When the world set its dogs on you, you asked what held the leashes. You did not know its name. Now you do." She stood, and the light put a halo of red around her hair. "Make no vows you do not mean. Our ears are better than yours. So are our appetites." She left a length of black ribbon on the bed. "If fear chews through your courage," she said at the door, "tie this to your wrist. It will take you to him. But know what it means. When she had gone, the silence changed. It acquired a scent. Rain, coins, cold roses. "I do not hide," said the king from the threshold. "I did not tie the ribbon. I know." He moved into the light. My fear, which had been a careful dog, lay down. "You saved me," I said. "Why?" "Because the world loves to destroy what is earnest. It is a habit I grew tired of, even in myself." "Yourself?" "I have been many kings," he said quietly. "Not all were better than men." A pause. Then, very softly, "We must go back." "To Hallowmere?" My stomach hollowed. "They will kill me again. They will try." He held out his hand. "And we will learn why they thought your blood would bargain well with the moon." When I put my palm in his, the old ring on his hand warmed as if it recognized the promise of a second promise. We left by a corridor that climbed like a vein to the surface. When the door broke into night, the blood moon still ruled. On its rim, I fancied I saw teeth. We walked toward the village. Nothing moved but the shadows. Once a wolf watched us from a low wall, and the king bowed to it as if to a priest. At the green, a thing waited that was once a church. Candles decked its bones. The villagers stood in a circle, whispering the name of a god that was not theirs. In the center lay a second altar, iron, not stone. On it, a knife. My uncle knelt before the knife. He had always been pious in the way coins are pious. Face up, to be seen. "She was claimed!" he shouted toward the trees, voice shrilling. "Night took what night wanted. The village is clean." The king stepped from the dark, and every candle recoiled. "You threw her to me," he said, "as one throws scraps to a kennel. And now you claim cleanliness." The villagers shook as wheat shakes in a wind. My uncle raised the knife with the same bravery he would have used to slaughter a lamb. "Hallowmere," the king said, "you left a bride to die alone." He turned to me. "Will you speak?" I opened my mouth, and the candles went out. Something older than the king had arrived. When the darkness lifted, a figure stood on the iron altar. It wore no face men would draw and still sleep. "Where we keep features," it had suggestions. A mouth suggested by a dozen smaller mouths, eyes suggested by slicks of wet coal, hands suggested by hooks. It smelled of river silt and sickbeds. "Your covenant," the king said, voice leveled as a blade, "was with me, not with this." The thing replied in a language like drowning. When it finished, tears ran from my uncle's eyes. He did not wipe them. They smoked. "What does it say?" I whispered. "That they fed it a life every blood moon," the king said. "The covenant predated me. They fed it brides who were not quite wanted and sons who were too weak to plow. And it kept the wolves to their forests and the rains to their seasons." The thing's mouths opened wider. The villagers fell to their knees the way trees fall to axes. My uncle lifted the knife, and the thing's hooks widened with anticipation. "Enough," the king said. He moved. The thing moved faster. It wrapped a hook around my uncle's wrist. Bone clicked like badly set teeth. The knife fell. The thing leaned toward me, its many mouths making wet, eager sounds. The king set a hand upon my shoulder and, with the other, lifted the old ring to the thing's not face. "By the law of the night," he said, "she is mine." The thing shuddered. The ring's metal glowed black. "It does not answer to kings," Sarah told me later, "only to older kings." The thing paused and smiled with none of the mouths we recognized. Then, it did what clever monsters do. It made a bargain. It reached toward the crowd and, with a wet pluck, drew out a child, a boy, no more than 9, with eyes like wet pebbles and hair sleep-tangled. The village wailed. The thing held him aloft like bait. "Release the man," the king said, "and put down the boy." The thing refused with exquisite patience. It wanted a trade. "Me?" I said. The king's grip tightened. "No. Me," I said again, loudly enough for the thing to hear. I will come. The thing's hooks bent into an imitation of clapping. It opened a corridor in itself, a hallway of mouth and hook and vein. The king said one word. Alice. I turned to him. You saved me. Let me now save anyone at all. He closed his eyes, and for the first time I saw not a sovereign but the exhaustion of a long winter. Very well, he said. But understand, bargains with this were always lies with teeth. He looked at the boy, who had not yet decided whether to be brave. You will run when I tell you. The boy nodded, trusting monsters more than men tonight. I stepped toward the thing. The corridor inside it pulsed a throat too eager. I did not tremble. I had run out of trembling. When I was one step away, the king whispered something that had never been written. The air shivered. The thing hissed not in pain, but in rage. I understood nothing, and it did not matter. I stepped into the thing's shadow, and the world inverted. I stood in a place that looked like a memory of my village after floodwater. Houses cocked their heads wrong. Doors yawned. The moon was the color of the inside of a cut. Snow fell, slow and red. The thing, less a thing here than a city with thoughts, watched me with 100 windows that blinked. Where am I? I asked the air. In its house, said the king from beside me, and I did not ask how he came. It keeps trophies. He pointed. On a fence hung ribbons, each tied in a bride's bow. Wind moved them the way grief moves the throat. Names were sewn in them with hair. Did you? I began. No, he said, reading the accusation before I could flavor it with pain. This covenant was the villagers. My own law forbids this house. That is why it wears a different moon. We walked. At a square's center stood a well. Dark flowed up from it instead of down. In the dark floated a single coin. My engagement ring, its little diamond suddenly ashamed to be hard. It keeps what it is given, I said, and what it is not. The thing's window smiled. It opened a door in a far wall, and beyond it I saw the boy still outside, still in the village green held like a candle flame cupped between palms. If I step forward, I said, he will be spared. For a breath, the king said. Then it will ask the village for 2 next year. This house is not appetite. It is habit. How do we break a habit older than our bones? I asked. By replacing it with a vow sharper than its teeth, he said. A vow that costs the vow maker. He removed the ring. The metal kissed the winter air and smoked black. Take it, he said. I will be yours, I said without blushing and without heat. Because being yours is less unholy than being theirs. That is not enough, he said, not unkindly. This house bargains in blood. Words are toys to it. He drew a nail along his palm. Dark wine welled. He offered his hand. Take. I did. His blood slid into me like a key into a very old lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, everything did. The square shuddered. The red snow paused mid-air to consider. The thing's windows flinched, as if someone had said its true, ugly name. What? I gasped, dizzy, breath briefly, not enough for the usable world. You are claimed, he said, by me and by what I guard. Claiming is not romance. It is structure. It is law. It is a wall that keeps teeth out. Or in. The house howled. Doors became mouths. Run, he said. We ran. The ring glowed, eager as a small god in a little temple. Behind us, the red snow sharpened. It blew not as flakes, but as razors. The king took the brunt. When it struck him, he did not bleed red. At the far end of the wrong square stood a gate made of ribs. It would not open to hands. It would open to what I had become. Speak, he said. I did not know the language, and yet I did. I told the gate I was no one's bride but my own, and that my name had been thrown away by men without the right to hold it. I told it the vow I had borrowed. Never again would my blood be used to feed a habit. The gate listened. It opened. We spilled through and fell into the true night. The village green back under its dim, honest stars. The boy lay on the grass. He breathed. The thing withdrew into itself like spite into a mouth at a wedding. The king fell to one knee. "Are you hurt?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "But not as much as you will be before this is finished." Word travels differently when it is frightened. By the next dusk, every door in Hallowmere had learned how to lock itself twice. The blood moon hung lower, like a coin tossed again and again and never landing right. We returned to the abbey, because the abbey had begun it. Sarah awaited us with 4 of the court, their expressions set to that polite blankness great houses wear at funerals. "Your Majesty," she said, "the Covenant House howled in our vaults. You have meddled with an old bone in the land. Bones rot, if unwashed," he said. "We are here to wash." She eyed my face. "You carry him." I felt it too, like a second heartbeat in the mouth of my throat. "I do." "It will not be simple to put down," Sarah said. "What learn to eat brides will learn to eat kings." "Then let it choke," the king replied. We assembled a procession of a kind the abbey had never seen. Vampires bearing lamps that did not smoke. A mortal girl with a ring too ancient for her finger. The seneschal, carrying a book that had stayed shut for a century, and a blade that had not. In the nave, the air bunched, as if against a slap. The thing was not there. Its absence made a sound like a tooth worrying a lip. "Call it," the king said. Sarah opened the book. The writing inside did not behave. It fled her eyes, and returned, coy and venomed. She read anyway. The words broke the air like ice. The thing came, not as a figure, as a room that revolved the wrong way, as nausea given a face for courtesy. It put its hooks through the stone and let them hang there as fishermen hang their hats on nails. "Covenant," the king said. "End." The thing laughed with holes. It offered new terms. The boy would live. The crops would not fail. The wolves would keep to themselves. If the village would merely return to the old rhythm, except this time the brides could be taken from anywhere, not just Hallowmere. There are economies of scale even in hell. "No," I said, before the king's answer could crown mine. It turned all its windows upon me. That attention felt like being dragged under a table as a joke and finding the floor full of teeth. "Take me," I said. "Once. For the last time." And then it ends. "Alice," the king began. "Your law," I said, "was to gather those forsaken. Mine is to stop the forsaking." Sarah's eyes narrowed with a rare and private approval. The thing widened, greedy. The king stepped between us. "You offered yourself," he said to me in a voice that had nothing of court left in it and everything of cold. "Now I offer myself instead." The thing considered. Kings are rarer coin. It grinned with all its negative space. "Majesty," Sarah said softly, "don't be noble. Be effective." He took my hand. "You gave me a vow sharper than teeth. I will spend it." He drew his blood again, and again it smoked like iron quenched. He pressed his palm to my breastbone. Heat raced into my bones and touched what I did not know I carried. A very old thirst that had nothing to do with blood. It was the thirst to matter beyond my size. "The claim binds us both," he said. "If it swallows me, it swallows you. If it refuses, it loses the village. Choose. House." The thing paused, caught briefly in an arithmetic it had not yet learned. Sarah opened the blade. It shone with a light that had never been friendly. "Now," she breathed. The king pulled me forward. We walked not apart but together into the thing. The blood moon had thinned to a bruised coin, but it still ruled the sky. The village watched from doorways. The court stood at the wood's edge. Sarah carried the book and the blade. The boy we had saved held his mother's hand, as if fingers were spells. The king addressed the green. "The covenant is ended," he said. "No more brides." No more bargains. No more houses that wear men's fear like skin. My uncle stepped forward, bareheaded. Then what keeps the wolves to the forest? What keeps the rain to the fields? If not the old trade, what keeps us? The king looked at me. Say it, he murmured. I did. We keep us. He nodded. We keep you, keeping you. This is the new law. On blood moon nights, those rejected and left alone shall be gathered not to be devoured but to be taught, sheltered, defended by us. A shiver passed through the court, as if a wind had been allowed in where none had been permitted for centuries. Sarah lifted the book. The letters rearranged themselves, reluctant and sulky. The blade drank the moon and looked pleased. And the price? Asked a woman at the back, voice thin with suspicion learned at funerals. The price is ours, the king said. We will not drink the helpless. We will not harvest fear. We will feed ourselves on old wars and older beasts and on the arrogance that grows in palaces and parliaments. There is always enough of that. The blood moon flickered once, twice as if deciding whether to approve. Then it went out. Not down. Out like a lamp pinched between two soft fingers. Darkness fell. In it, a shape moved. Not the house, something quieter. A hunger with better manners. I did not fear. I had called mercy. It had answered. It would again. I stepped into the dark and raised my voice. If there is another covenant, I said, it will be with me, with my name, with the girl who was thrown and walked away. Take me if taking means guarding what I guard. A hand, cool and entirely human, found mine in the dark. I claim you, the king said softly. Only if you claim me, not as bride or consort or coin, but as witness. As witness to what? To a kingdom that learns to hunger for the right things. Light returned, not from the moon, but from 100 small lanterns lifted by villagers who had decided for once to be brave without bribes. In that glow, the court changed. Their eyes dimmed to a softer red. Their mouths forgot to show their edges. They looked like old saints, painted by an artist who thought holiness might wear fangs without apology. Sarah shut the book. The blade sighed and slept. The boy let go of his mother's hand and reached for the king's ring. He touched it with a solemn finger and did not burn. The ring's metal, for the first time, reflected light. Unique endings are just beginnings that refuse to brag, Sarah murmured to me as the villagers and the court mingled like two streams rediscovering a river. What do you call this one? I asked. Not an ending, she said. A keeping. The king looked at me then, and there was no sovereign in his gaze at all, only a man with a long winter behind him and a longer one made bearable by a single coal. Alice of Hallowmere, he said. Rejected and left to die alone until the vampire king claimed you under the blood moon. Will you write the new law with me? Yes, I said. And when it strays, I will call mercy again. Good, he said, smiling with the first warmth of a dawn this land had not yet earned. Then let the old night end. Let the new hunger begin. The lanterns brightened. The forest exhaled. Somewhere a wolf howled, not in mourning or in menace, but as if counting its pack and finding more names than before. And I, who had been the offering, became the oath.